Years ago, my wife and I were going through some personal difficulties. We were making a decision about whether or not we were going to stay together, very frankly. Everybody in a relationship, I believe, has these moments and times when there's a struggle there and you've been together for a while and you're not certain whether this is the right path and you're thinking about these things and so on. And nevertheless, it was a very difficult time emotionally for both of us. And I can remember years and years ago, as we were going through this, what it did for me to be in that state. I became much more loving. I became much more concerned with other people. I became less concerned with the pettiness of so many things that you find yourself worked up about, because I had a different focus in my life. And I can remember thinking, as we resolved it and got back closer together, and today are very close and very loving together, looking back on that time as like something that I had to go through at that time. And that what it did is it helped me to see how absurd it is for us to be focused on the minutia of life. Whether or not the walls are clean, or whether or not the toys are put away, or whether or not your food is prepared on time, or whether somebody is late with something, or whether the phone doesn't ring or does ring or whatever. Like, all of those things are so minute in contrast to what you're really struggling with. And then what it also helped me to do in terms of getting this big picture was to look at some of the things that other people were going through, some of the problems and difficulties that they were having. Very often when something goes wrong in somebody else's life that we're close to, one of our parents gets ill, there's an accident of some kind. When Marilyn had that accident, I can remember how it affected me. And it gives you pause to remind yourself that you have a lot to be thankful for, and that you have a very powerful mind here that can make anything happen that you want to happen, as long as you keep yourself centered or keep yourself focused. I was able to shift from all of those petty little things. And I look back on that now and I think, well, that's what I had to learn. That's what it was for, that there's a purpose in everything, and that perhaps one of the things that I had to learn 8 or 10 years ago was how to be more compassionate. And perhaps the only way I was going to learn how to be more compassionate was to have to go through some of this stuff myself. So, like, you can do that. You can do that now in your own life. Know that there's a lesson in this for you. Know that there are no accidents in this perfect universe. And know that the deep troubles that you may be experiencing or may be hard for you have something in them for you. And that there's a secondary purpose to them. And if it does help you to slow down, and if it does help you to get a bigger picture, and it does help you to be more compassionate and more loving towards other people, then what you do is you begin to bless those things that are in your own life as offering you an opportunity to transcend them. And once you've transcended them, then you don't have to go back to that again. And for sure, my wife and I do not have to go back to ever doubting whether we want to make it and whether we want our family to stay intact and whether we want to stay loving and so on. We don't ever have to question that again. We've been there, and we both learned how to look within. And when you do look within, to be grateful for what this person is offering you. So that every time I think about my wife behaving in a way that I don't like, or vice versa, we've learned how to zip it. How to just not make ourselves miserable by saying things and by doing things that will just create more difficulties. Because we've been on the edge. We've been to that edge, and we've looked over the edge and seen what it's like to maybe have to raise a family as single parents or whatever, and to be without each other. And now we're a tremendous source of strength to each other, instead of looking for the things that we don't like. So the way to the big picture often is through seeing the problems in your own life from a different perspective. And you begin to say to yourself, all right, how can I apply the awareness of these thoughts and how I use my mind to make my life all that I want it to be? To bring into my life the things that are important to me, to improve the quality of my relationships, to have the success and so on that I think that I'm entitled to. And it's really getting to the point where you know that every thought that you have has a potential for coming into your life, or coming into form. You start to get real cautious about having anything in your mind that isn't going to work for you. And you begin to question why you would keep any of those thoughts in you. I can remember one story of a woman who came to me one time and told me how miserable she was, that she was married to a drunk. And I said, well, what's wrong? And she said, well, He slurs his words, and he repeats himself, and he smells bad, and it's just awful to be around him. And I said, let's see if I understand. Let's see who's crazy in this little scenario you've just described. Now, you said you've married to a drunk, and the drunk slurs his words, and he repeats himself, and he smells bad, and he sounds foolish. I said, that's every drunk I've ever known does exactly that. We got a drunk who's acting and doing everything that you would expect a drunk to do. Now we got you, and you're married to someone that you call a drunk, and you're expecting him to be sober. You know, now who's crazy? The drunk who's doing what he's supposed to, or you who's expecting someone who is what you've defined him to be something different than what they are? He is what he is. And why would you want to entertain, why would you want to keep thoughts in your mind that are making you miserable, which is going to expand misery for you in your life by just having those thoughts there? Why not change around those thoughts and tell yourself that you're, like, if you argue for your misery, then the only thing you're going to get is your misery. You have to get that, and you're arguing for it all the time. You're going around talking about how miserable you are. So you want to get real careful about that. And I suggest to every one of you that whatever it is you find yourself incapable of doing, or whatever you found that has been a great obstacle, or whatever it is that's in a relationship that isn't working, that you just can't seem to transcend, or whatever's going on with a particular employee or a way that you're approaching anything in your business, that if you examine, just for a moment, if you examine what belief is it that supports this behavior, because the ancestor to every action is a belief, is a thought, and then work at re-examining that.
So what we have to do is learn how to take this ego of ours, this part of us that believes that who we are is what we have and what we do and what other people think of us. But remember, if you grow up believing that you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't. And if you believe that you are what you have, when it's gone, you aren't. And if you believe that you are what other people think of you, your reputation, which we raise people to believe, I have to be concerned with what other people think of me. Take this ego and retrain it. And one of the ways that you do to retrain it is, first, you take this idea that the ego has of fear. What are you afraid of? Anybody out there, what are you afraid of? Shift from fear to curiosity. Become curious about what you're afraid of. That's what Lao Tzu taught me. Become curious about what you're afraid of. You're afraid of flying? Get curious about that. Get interested in that. You're afraid of snakes, you're afraid of disapproval, you're afraid. Just shift from fear and say, I'm going to become more curious about what I'm afraid of. And then take all of the things that you're attached to, like all of your photographs, like all of your furniture, like all of your clothing, like all of the stuff that you find so much attachment to, and start letting it go. Start letting it go. You know, the day that I turned that key on May the 11th in 2006, I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew there was a shift taking place. I felt freer than I'd ever felt, I think, in my life. In my mid-60s, out there on a whole new adventure. And here we are talking about it on national television, on PBS. Take that idea that you have to be attached to things and know that you came in with nothing, with no thing. And you're going to leave with nothing, with no thing. And understand that your life is a parenthesis in eternity. Live there without attachments. And then take your need to be in control of yourself, of others, of the situation, and shift from control to trust. Begin to have a trust. Lao Tzu is profound about this. In each one of the 81 verses, it comes up about 60 times as you look at letting go and letting God, allowing yourself to trust in your nature, allowing yourself to no longer believe that everything has to be controlled by me, and that other people no longer have to be in control of me as well. Begin to trust. Just like you did for the first 9 months. You trusted. Your nose showed up. Your height showed up. Your eyes showed up. Whatever. It all showed up. It's all perfect. It's all divine. So why not wander through your life and have this wonderful, peaceful knowing that it's all fine? And finally, shift from your sense of entitlement. Nobody can treat me that way. I'm entitled to have this. Well, I paid for that. I let go. I mean, that in 1 year, I let go of all of my entitlements. I don't feel I'm entitled to anything. I'm just here. Shift from entitlements to radical humility. Lao Tzu speaks about it so often. Stay humble. Stay low. The greatest leaders are the ones who do the least. The ones who stay back and just model and allow. And at the end of the day, in one of the verses of the Tao, it says, the people will say, we did it ourselves. We did it ourselves. In verse 49 of the Tao Te Ching, here's an exact quote. The sage is kind to the kind and kind to the unkind, because the nature of his being is kindness. And also, be wise and help all beings impartially, abandoning none. You know what I do? Just before I did this program, I have to admit I was nervous. I was humbled by it. Like, who are you, Wayne Dyer? Who are you to read the Tao and believe that you can interpret it on television and interpret it in a book and spend a year and say, like, I got real humble with that. And you know what I say? Tao, which is just another word for God, or Source, or Krishna, or Allah, or whatever you want to call it, guide me. Guide me now. I have that awareness before I come out. If you knew, it says in the Course in Miracles, if you knew who walked beside you at all times on this path that you have chosen, you could never experience fear or doubt again. Okay, let's go on to the next thought. To change. So you're changing from not trusting in your nature to trusting in your nature. You change your thought from I need more to what I call living contentment. What is this thing about more? It's the mantra of the ego, isn't it? I have to have more. I have to collect more stuff. I have to have more friends. I have to have more money. It's more, when where you came from nowhere. You don't need anything. It's a continuous bombardment that we are all exposed to in this whole world of believing that we have to have more. It's one of the reasons why I love public television so much. You don't see ads on PBS. You don't have to be constantly exposed to the idea that you have to have more and you have to get more, and if you don't have this, then you're not complete, and so on. So we get bombarded with this idea of attracting more. And Lao Tzu says, live contentment. Live in a state of being contented. Here's verse 81, the last verse of the Tao Te Ching. My favorite translation of it, and I put it right into the book. Sages do not accumulate anything, but give everything to others. Having more, the more they give. But you gotta change your awareness of yourself, as Maslow said. And one of the ways that you change your awareness of yourself is to understand a very simple premise. Think of an apple pie. Here's an apple pie. And this apple pie, you take this apple pie and you take a slice of this apple pie and you put it over here. And then you walk over to the slice and you say to the apple pie, the slice of apple pie, what are you like? What are you like? And the little slice of apple pie says, I must be like what I came from. You wouldn't expect it to be pineapple. You wouldn't expect it to be cherry. You would expect it to be like what it came from, right? So why is it that we understand this, and yet we don't understand that we too must be like what we came from? We are pieces of God. We came from a divine source. We have to trust in our divinity. We have to understand that we are not this package of bones and skin encapsulating, these internal organs, that's not who we are. That's what we call the false self. It's an illusion. That who we really are is what we came from. And what we came from is eternal, it's infinite, it's kind, It's unlimited. It excludes no one. So that if we understand that we are really here as spiritual beings, just having a human experience, not the other way around. We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. It's the other way around. Our essence is our greatness, what we came from. We must be like what we came from. I've just taken up this new practice. It's called yoga. Now, I'm 65 years old, and I've decided that there are certain things that I was told that I couldn't do at earlier stages of my life that I've decided I'm taking on. I don't care what my age is or what anybody else has told. What Mrs. McConnell told me in the 6th grade at Marquette Elementary School in Detroit, that you don't have to come to art class. It's really not for you. You can go dribble basketballs maybe, but you don't want to come to art. This is because she saw some of my stick drawings that I was pretty proud of. And then there was Mr. Tubbs at Denby High School in Detroit, who, when I turned in my first drawing in drafting class, I didn't even know what drafting was. When I just signed, they threw me in there because the school was so overcrowded. It was my elective. And I turned in my first drawing, and he asked me the question, "Do you have a little sister?" Like in the 3rd grade, because she perhaps is the one that did this way. That was my whole view of my artistic ability. I'm out there painting now. I'm doing painting. And I'm also doing yoga, all right? And I've learned some things about myself in the process of doing this. It was like a change in attitude, a shift, a belief system that I no longer was hanging on to. And that's what we have to do. It doesn't matter what your age is. It doesn't matter what your beliefs have been. It doesn't matter what other people have tried to convince you of in the past. When you move into spirit and have a knowing that I have the capacity to be able to do this, you leave behind the false self. And the false self is really nothing more than this ego. Look, you came from a divine place that is unlimited, that says you can be anything you put your attention on. And then you bought into a whole series of beliefs that were handed to you by very well-meaning people attempting to convince you that you had limitations, that you couldn't do this, that this wasn't possible. And I'd like to suggest to you that you took on something called an ego. E-G-O. An ego. You came in from divinity, you came in from a place of unlimited, you show up and you edged God out. E-G-O. And when you edge God out, it doesn't mean that you're sacrilegious, it doesn't mean that you're not a moral person. It means that you take on a belief system that says, who I am is no longer this infinite divine being who can step outside and observe this body and believe that he can make it do whatever I put my attention on and use it to have the same powers that is spoken about in the New Testament. Even the least among you can do all that I have done, and even greater things. It's within each and every one of us, except that we bought into an idea that who we are is what we have, who we are is what we do, who we are is what other people think I am, who I am is separate from everybody else, who I am is separate from what I would like to attract into my life, and who I am is separate from my source. And we believe in this separation, and we believe in this identity that who I am is what I have. So we start accumulating. We accumulate and accumulate and accumulate. The problem is that when you stop accumulating, and if who you are is what you accumulate, then you have no value as soon as your things start to disappear, as soon as they wear out, as soon as somebody else takes them, as soon as the government taxes them, as soon as any number of things. Who I am is what I do. If you no longer can do, then you aren't. You no longer exist. Who I am is my reputation, and we raise our children often to believe that what's most important is what other people think of you. Fit in. Do what you've been told to do. Do what the crowd does. Follow the herd. And you know what happens, what you step in when you follow the herd. So we take on all of these sort of false ideas, and we have a tendency to believe them. And inspiration is moving back into spirit. And it's moving back into spirit in such a way that you no longer accept yourself as anything other than divine. If this source that we call God or soul or spirit, if it could speak, this is what it would sound like. And then later on, I'm going to talk to you about what it looks like. What does it look like? I am the source of all material and spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from me. That's what it sounds like. Everything emanates from me. So that means you. And that's why the words, with God all things are possible, means that when you find in your heart a way to reconnect to this, and remember what I talked about in those opening quotes, that this field of intention is a field that is only corroded because we take on something that separates us from the source. And that is called the ego. And the ego is really nothing more than an idea that we carry around. It's the source of virtually all of our problems. The only difficulty is you can't check into a hospital. Like if you got an appendix problem, you check in, get an appendectomy. There's no place that I know of that gives egoectomies. It would be nice, but it doesn't work that way. So that what you want to do is figure out a way to get rid of this idea that who I am is separate from this. And this is your source. And when you reconnect to your source, live in harmony with your source, you are connecting to the field of intention. And when you're with this field of intention, everything that this field of intention from which all material worlds emanate, everything that it can do, you can do, because you are it and it is you. The problems that we have is we've come to a place where we believe that we are separate from it. And so we start to believe that I am what I do, and I am what I have, and I am separate from everybody else, and I am my reputation, and I'm separate from what is missing in my life. But this field from which all things originate, if it's everywhere, it's got to be in you. And if it's everywhere and it has to be in you, it has to also be in everything that you perceive to be missing from your life. It has to be in that too, because there's no place that it's not. And if there's no place that it's not, you literally are already connected to everything that you would like to attract into your life. What keeps you from doing it is your belief that you're separate from your source. We want to reconnect to this source. People ask me the question, what about a free will? If I was intended here, and the shape of my life was intended here from this source, where does that leave me with a free will? Well, where it leaves you with a free will is this. You have a free will to decide whether or not you are going to connect or not connect to that source. That's your free will. If you make a choice, a conscious choice, to stay disconnected from it and believe that you are all of these things that I just illustrated in the ego, this field of intention doesn't know anything about non-well-being. It creates from a source of well-being. It doesn't know anything about fear, about anxiety, about worry. It just is in a constant state of creating. There's a quotation that goes like this: self-realization, which is really reconnecting to your source. Self-realization means that we have been consciously connected with our source of being. We are reconnected to this source, which I'm going to describe in detail in this program, what I believe the faces of intention look like. Once we have made this connection, then absolutely nothing can go wrong. That's from Swami Paramananda. Nothing can go wrong when you reconnect to source. All of our struggles, all of our illnesses, all of the scarcities in our life, all of the problems we have in our relationships, all of this stuff came about because we disconnected ourselves from a field of intention that is nothing but just well-being at work. It only wants you to be in a state of happiness.
Treat yourself as if you already are what you'd like to be. Whatever it is that you envision for yourself, no matter how lofty or impossible it may seem to you right now, I encourage you to begin acting as if what you would like to become is already your reality. This is a wonderful way to set into motion the forces that will collaborate with you to make your dreams come true. To activate the creative forces that lie dormant in your life, you must go to the unseen world, the world beyond your form. Here is where what doesn't exist for you in your world of form will be created. You might think of it this way. In form, you receive information. When you move to spirit, you receive inspiration. It is this world of inspiration that will guide you to access anything that you would like to have in your life. What it means to become inspired. Some of the most significant advice I've ever read was written more than 2,000 years ago by an ancient teacher named Patanjali. He instructed his devotees to become inspired. You may recall that the word inspire originates from the words in and spirit. Patanjali suggested that inspiration involves a mind that transcends all limitations, thoughts that break all their bonds, and a consciousness that expands in every direction. Here is how you can become inspired. Place your thoughts on what it is you'd like to become, an artist, a musician, a computer programmer, a dentist, whatever. In your thoughts, begin to picture yourself having the skills to do these things. No doubts, only a knowing. Then begin acting as if these things were already your reality. As an artist, your vision allows you to draw, to visit art galleries, to talk with famous artists, and to immerse yourself in the art world. In other words, you begin to act as an artist in all aspects of your life. In this way, you're getting out in front of yourself and taking charge of your own destiny at the same time that you're cultivating inspiration. The more you see yourself as what you'd like to become, the more inspired you are. The dormant forces that Patanjali described come alive, and you discover that you're a greater person than you ever dreamed yourself to be. Imagine that, dormant forces that were dead or non-existent, springing into being and collaborating with you as a result of your becoming inspired and acting as if what you want is already here. By having the courage to declare yourself as already being where you want to be, you will almost force yourself to act in a new, exciting, and spiritual fashion. You can also apply this principle to areas other than your chosen vocation. If you're living a life of scarcity and all of the nice things that many people have are not coming your way, perhaps it's time to change your thinking and act as if what you enjoy having is already here. This doesn't involve deception, arrogance, or hurting others. This is a silent agreement between you and God in which you discreetly work in harmony with the forces of the universe to make your dreams become a reality. This involves a knowing on your part that success and inner peace are your birthright, that you are a child of God, and as such, you're entitled to a life of joy, love, and happiness. In your relationships with your lovers, co-workers, and family, act as if what you would like to materialize in those relationships is already here. If you want a sense of harmony in the workplace, maintain a clear vision and expectation of this harmony. Then you're out in front of your day, seeing 5 o'clock arriving peacefully for everyone when it's still 7:30 in the morning. Each time you have an encounter with someone, your 5 o'clock vision pops into your head, and you act in a peaceful, harmonious way so as not to nullify what you know is coming. Furthermore, you act toward everyone else as if they, too, are all that they're capable of becoming. These kinds of expectations lead you to say, "I'm sure you'll have everything ready this afternoon," rather than, "You're always late with everything, and I wish you'd get on the ball." When you treat others in this way, they also fulfill the destiny that you've reminded them is there for them. In your family, particularly with your children, it's important to always have this little thought in mind. Catch them doing things right. Remind them often of their inherent brilliance, their capacity for being responsible, their innate talents, and their fantastic abilities. Treat them as if they're already responsible, bright, attractive, and honorable. "You are so terrific. I'm positive you'll feel great about your interview. You're so smart. I know you'll study well and do well on that exam. You're always connected to God, and God doesn't do sickness. You're going to feel much better tomorrow at this time." When you act towards your children, parents, siblings, and even more distant relatives as if the relationship was great and was going to stay that way, and you point out their greatness rather than their goofiness, it is their greatness that you will see. In your relationships to your significant other, whomever that may be sure to apply this principle as frequently as you can. If things aren't going well, ask yourself, am I treating this relationship as it is or as I would like it to be? So how do you want it to be? Peaceful, harmonious, mutually satisfying, respectful, loving? Of course you do. As such, before your next encounter, see it in those ways. Have expectations that focus on the qualities of inner peace and success. You'll find yourself pointing out what you love about that person rather than what they're doing wrong. You'll also see the other person responding to you in love and harmony rather than in an embittered way. Your ability to get out in front of yourself and see the outcome before it transpires will cause you to act in ways that bring about these results. This strategy for living works for virtually everything. Before I speak to an audience, I always see them as loving, supportive, and having a terrific experience. Before writing, I see myself with no writer's block, being inspired and having spiritual guidance available to me at all times. As A Course in Miracles reminds me, if you knew who walked beside you at all times, you could never experience fear again. This is the essence of inspiration, as well as seeing the future in terms of how you want it to be, and then acting exactly in that manner.